Have you ever had one of those moments where nothing is technically wrong, but every instinct in your body is screaming at you to leave? Maybe you've walked through a parking lot late at night and felt like someone was watching. Maybe you've entered an elevator with a stranger and suddenly felt uncomfortable for reasons you couldn't explain. Most of us have experienced that strange feeling at least once. The problem is that we often ignore it. We tell ourselves we're overreacting. We convince ourselves we're being paranoid. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes that feeling is the only warning we get before something terrible happens. Tonight's story is about a routine drive home that turned into a situation so unsettling that years later, the driver still wonders what would have happened if he had stayed just a few minutes longer. What began as a normal commute ended with a realization that one small decision may have saved his life. And as we go through this story, we'll also explore why criminals often create situations that appear harmless at first, how our instincts process danger before our conscious minds do, and what lessons we can learn from encounters like this. Let's begin. The night started like hundreds of others before it. After finishing a long shift at work around 11 p.m., the driver climbed into his car and began the journey home. He had made this trip countless times. The route was familiar. The roads were predictable. Nothing about the drive felt unusual. In fact, the drive home had become something he genuinely enjoyed. After spending hours dealing with customers, co-workers, deadlines, and responsibilities, those 45 minutes behind the wheel felt peaceful. The city lights gradually disappeared behind him. Traffic became lighter. Noise faded away. Eventually, it was just him, his vehicle, and miles of quiet road. Many people can probably relate to this. For some, the drive home becomes a transition period between work and personal life. It's a chance to decompress, a chance to think, a chance to let the stress of the day slowly fade away. Unfortunately, isolated roads can also create opportunities for people with bad intentions. Criminals often prefer locations where witnesses are unlikely to appear. They look for areas with limited lighting, areas where help is far away, areas where victims feel comfortable because they have traveled there many times before. As the driver left the outskirts of the city behind him, he entered a stretch of road he knew particularly well. The road cut through a heavily wooded area. Tall trees lined both sides. Streetlights were scarce. At night, the darkness seemed to swallow everything beyond the edge of the pavement. To make matters worse, fog had settled across the area, the kind of fog that seems to float just above the road, the kind that turns headlights into glowing walls of white haze. Visibility wasn't great, but he wasn't concerned. He knew every curve and every mile marker. He had traveled this road for years. Nothing had ever happened before. That sense of familiarity is important. Psychologists often discuss something known as normalcy bias. It's our tendency to believe that because something has never happened before, it probably won't happen now. Most of the time, this assumption works, but occasionally it causes people to dismiss warning signs that deserve attention. About 20 minutes from home, something unusual appeared ahead. At first, it looked like a small blinking light. It was difficult to judge distance because the fog distorted everything. The light seemed suspended in the darkness, blinking, disappearing, reappearing. The driver eased off the accelerator. His curiosity was growing. What was causing the light? A bicycle? A parked vehicle? Road construction? Someone standing on the shoulder? The closer he got, the harder it became to tell. Then suddenly, the light vanished. Completely. No blinking, no glow, nothing. For a moment he wondered if he had imagined it. Then everything happened at once. A vehicle emerged from the fog, without warning, without headlights, Without enough time to react, the car pulled directly into the roadway ahead of him. He slammed on the brakes. Tires gripped the pavement. The front of his vehicle tapped the rear of the other car. The impact wasn't severe. Neither vehicle appeared badly damaged. But the situation immediately felt strange. Most drivers involved in a collision react in predictable ways. They check for injuries. They inspect damage. They exchange information. This encounter felt different from the start. The vehicle that had pulled in front of him looked old, poorly maintained, worn down. Its headlights remained off. That detail alone stood out. Why would someone sit on the side of a dark road in heavy fog without headlights? The driver stepped out of his vehicle. At first, he was simply annoyed. The entire situation seemed unnecessary. As he stood near his car, he watched movement inside the other vehicle. Someone was shifting around, but nobody exited. Several seconds passed. Then a large man finally stepped out and approached. Almost immediately, something felt off. The man avoided eye contact. His responses were brief. His behavior seemed unnatural. Instead of acting frustrated about the collision, he appeared distracted, nervous, focused on something else. Experienced investigators often mention that suspicious behavior isn't usually one dramatic action. It's often a collection of small inconsistencies. A person avoiding eye contact, an unusual delay, answers that don't match the situation, body language that contradicts spoken words. Individually, these details may mean nothing. Together, they create a pattern. The driver asked if everything was okay. The response was short, uncomfortable, almost rehearsed. At this point, the driver made a decision that may have changed everything. He informed the man that there appeared to be no significant damage and that he intended to leave. A normal person would probably agree. After all, nobody wants to spend extra time standing on a dark road after midnight. Instead, the man asked him to wait. He claimed he wanted to inspect the vehicle further. The request sounded reasonable, but what happened next didn't. Rather than checking the rear bumper where the impact occurred, the man slowly walked around the entire vehicle. He appeared to be searching for damage in places that couldn't possibly have been affected. This behavior raises an interesting question. Was he actually inspecting the vehicle, or was he buying time? Criminals frequently use delays to create opportunities. Every additional second allows accomplices to reposition themselves, allows victims to lower their guard, allows situations to develop. As the man moved toward the passenger side of the vehicle, the driver noticed movement inside. A large figure rose from the back seat. Until that moment, he hadn't realized someone else was there. That realization changed everything. Think about the sequence. A mysterious blinking light, a vehicle concealed in fog, an unusual collision, a nervous driver, a suspicious delay, and now a hidden passenger emerging from the rear seat. Suddenly the situation looked very different. This is where intuition becomes fascinating. The human brain processes enormous amounts of information without conscious awareness. Sometimes we detect danger before we can explain why. Researchers studying threat recognition have found that people often notice patterns subconsciously long before they can identify them logically. The driver's instincts finally reached a breaking point. Without waiting for additional explanations, he returned to his vehicle, locked the doors, started the engine. The second man climbed out. Both individuals began waving, motioning for him to stop, telling him to wait. But the driver had already made his decision. Fear surged through him. He shifted into gear, steered around them, and accelerated down the road. Could he have been overreacting? Possibly. Could there have been an innocent explanation? Maybe. But here's the important reality. When your safety is at stake, you don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You only need enough concern to remove yourself from danger. Too many people remain in risky situations because they worry about appearing rude. They worry about offending strangers. They worry about seeming paranoid. Predators understand this. They exploit politeness. They rely on hesitation. They count on people ignoring instincts. The driver continued through the fog, heart racing, hands gripping the steering wheel. He checked the rearview mirror repeatedly. For a while he could see headlights behind him. Then eventually, they disappeared. Not wanting anyone to follow him home, he stopped at a gas station several minutes away. This was another smart decision. Security experts often recommend avoiding direct travel home if you suspect someone may be following you. Public locations provide lighting, cameras, witnesses, and opportunities to seek help. For approximately 15 minutes, he waited. No vehicle appeared. No suspicious individuals arrived. Eventually, he continued home safely. But the story didn't truly end there, because years later, he still thinks about that encounter. And that's understandable. Many survivors of potentially dangerous situations replay events repeatedly. They wonder what was happening behind the scenes. They imagine alternate outcomes. They ask themselves questions that can never be answered. What if he had remained outside longer? What if he had followed the men to inspect the vehicle? What if the second passenger had approached before he returned to his car? No one knows, but history provides plenty of examples showing that road-related crimes do occur. There have been documented cases involving staged accidents, fake breakdowns, and deliberate vehicle blockages used to isolate victims. Most encounters never escalate, but some do, and that's exactly why awareness matters. One particularly well-known example involved criminals intentionally creating minor traffic incidents to lure drivers from their vehicles before robbing them. Law enforcement agencies across multiple countries have warned drivers about similar tactics over the years. Again, this doesn't mean every unusual roadside encounter is a criminal trap. However, it demonstrates that such schemes are not purely fictional. The key lesson isn't paranoia. The goal isn't to view every stranger as a threat. The lesson is balance. Stay observant. Trust your instincts. Pay attention to inconsistencies. Recognize when behavior doesn't match circumstances. Most importantly, understand that leaving an uncomfortable situation is always acceptable. You don't owe strangers unlimited access to your time. You don't owe suspicious individuals the benefit of the doubt when your safety may be at risk. If something feels wrong, create distance first and analyze later. The driver never learned who those men were. He never discovered their intentions. Maybe they were harmless. Maybe they weren't. But one thing remains undeniable. Every detail of the encounter pointed toward a situation that was becoming increasingly dangerous. And by choosing action instead of hesitation, he ensured he would never have to find out what happened next. That's what makes stories like this so unsettling. Not because we know the ending, but because we don't. The unknown is often far more frightening than certainty. And somewhere on that fog-covered road, hidden behind unanswered questions, lies a mystery that may never be solved. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's simple. Listen when your instincts speak. They aren't always right, but ignoring them can sometimes carry consequences far greater than being wrong. Stay alert, stay aware, and never be afraid to leave a situation that doesn't feel right. Sometimes the safest decision you'll ever make is the one that gets you back on the road and away from danger.